She had worked every ward, and no one really knew her. That was exactly the point. Anna Smith was a ghost in blue scrubs, a float nurse, a name on a schedule moved around Metropolitan General Hospital like a chess piece with no strategic value. Pediatrics one day, geriatrics the next, the emergency room on a chaotic Friday night. She was competent, quiet, and utterly forgettable. Her invisibility was a shield, forged in fire and shrapnel, polished to a perfect sheen by 3 years of deliberate anonymity. She clocked in, she did her job, she clocked out. She never went for drinks after a shift. She never shared details of a life that, for all intents and purposes, did not exist. Her colleagues saw a plain woman in her early 30s, hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes a non-committal shade of gray that rarely made contact. They saw hands that were steady with an IV drip and efficient at changing dressings. They did not see the fine, silvery network of scars hidden beneath her long sleeves, or the muscle memory that could field strip a rifle in 45 seconds flat. They saw a nurse. They never once suspected a surgeon. Smith. The voice was sharp, impatient. Dr. Marcus Thorne, chief of surgery, stood over the nurse's station, his designer suit a stark contrast to the functional chaos of the ER. He held out a tablet without looking at her. These post-op discharge orders need to be triple-checked and filed. The residents are swamped with the MVA on the interstate. It was scut work, paperwork, a task for an intern, not a nurse with 10 years of registered experience. But Anna just nodded, taking the tablet. Yes, Dr. Thorne. He gave a dismissive grunt and swept away, his entourage of residents scrambling to keep up. He hadn't used her name. He'd used her designation. Smith. A cog. She was background noise to men like him, and that suited her just fine. Men like him, with their polished shoes and unearned certainty, were a predictable breed. They saw hierarchy, not skill. She began tapping through the files, her movements economical. Her mind, however, was cataloging the room. A multi-vehicle accident had flooded the trauma base. Bay 1, tension pneumothorax. The resident was fumbling with the chest tube insertion point. Too low. She mentally corrected his angle. Bay 3, probable splenic rupture. The patient's pressure was dropping too fast for the saline drip they were running. They needed to hang blood. Now. Bay 4, a compound femur fracture, well handled. It was a constant, silent triage, a reflex she could not turn off, a ghost of a life she had tried to bury in the sterile, predictable world of civilian medicine. She finished Thorne's paperwork in 7 minutes. As she set the tablet back on the counter, the world fractured. The first sound was a loud metallic slam, the main sliding doors of the ER shuddering to a halt. The second was the shattering of the glass reception partition, a spiderweb of cracks erupting from a single deafening gunshot. Screams echoed off the linoleum floors, raw, primal panic. Anna Smith did not scream. She dropped. One moment she was standing. The next, she was a low profile behind the steel nurse's station, the movement so fluid it was almost imperceptible. Her gray eyes, no longer non-committal, were now chips of flint, scanning, assessing, analyzing. 4 men. No, 5. Dressed in black tactical gear, armed with short-barreled rifles held with practiced ease. They moved with a chilling economy of motion. Not common criminals, not a drug addict with a handgun. This was professional. One of them was barking orders. "Door secure, comms down, no one moves." The hospital's security guards, brave but hopelessly outgunned, were the first to fall. One was down near the entrance, a dark pool spreading from his chest. The other, a man named Miller, a former Marine with a kind smile she'd shared coffee with once, was trying to draw his sidearm. He never cleared the holster. A 3-round burst, tight and controlled, stitched across his torso. Miller crumpled behind the admissions desk, a choked gasp escaping his lips. Anna's hands clenched into fists. A familiar, cold rage began to burn away the fog of her carefully constructed anonymity. She saw the wound pattern, entry points clustered over the right lung and mediastinum. Bad, very bad. The leader, a tall man with a skull-print balaclava, surveyed the terrified doctors, nurses, and patients cowering on the floor. His voice, amplified by the sudden silence, was calm and devoid of emotion. My name is not important. We are here for one asset. Cooperate, and you will live. Resist, and you will join the guards. We need a doctor, now. Dr. Thorne, pale and trembling, but still clinging to the tatters of his authority, slowly got to his feet. I am Dr. Marcus Thorne, Chief of Surgery. What do you want? We want you to keep a man alive, the leader said, gesturing with his rifle towards Miller. He is of no use to us dead. Fix him. This was a test. Anna saw it instantly. They wanted to see the hospital's capabilities, gauge the skill of the staff. Thorne, flanked by 2 gunmen, was shoved towards the fallen guard. He knelt, his expensive suit trousers soaking in the blood. He was a brilliant elective surgeon, a master of the sterile, controlled environment of the operating theater. This was not his world. The floor was not sterile. The lighting was terrible. The patient was dying in front of him. He's got multiple gunshot wounds to the chest, diminished breath sounds on the right, tracheal deviation. Thorne's voice was shaky. He was running through the checklist, but his hands hesitated. He was paralyzed by the protocol that wasn't designed for this. Get me a trauma pack. I need a large-bore chest tube now, a resident yelled, scrambling for supplies. Anna watched from behind the counter. She saw Miller's lips turning blue. She saw the rapid, thready pulse in his neck. She saw the distended jugular veins. Thorne was missing it. The resident was missing it. They were focused on the collapsed lung. They were missing the bigger, more immediate killer. The resident returned, ripping open a chest tube kit. Thorne took the trocar, a thick, sharp needle, and palpated Miller's ribs. Okay. 5th intercostal space, mid-axillary line. No. The word was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a scalpel. Everyone froze. The leader, Kaelin, turned his head slowly. Thorne looked up, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. What did you say? Thorne hissed. Anna rose slowly from behind the desk, her hands held open and away from her body. Her eyes were locked on Miller's chest. I said no, she repeated, her voice steady. You put that in, you'll kill him. I'm the chief of surgery here, Thorne spat, his fear momentarily replaced by incandescent rage at being contradicted by a float nurse. And who in the hell are you? Kaelin took a step towards her, rifle leveled. She's right. Who are you? Anna ignored them both. Her focus was entirely on the dying man. She knelt beside him, her fingers going to his neck, her eyes scanning the subtle signs the others had missed. The muffled heart sounds she could practically feel through the floor. The paradoxical pulse. It wasn't a simple tension pneumothorax. It was cardiac tamponade. The pericardial sac around his heart was filling with blood, squeezing it to a standstill. A chest tube would relieve the pressure in the lung, but it wouldn't stop the heart from being crushed. Miller's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy with shock and pain, but they found hers, a flicker of recognition, a desperate, impossible spark of hope. His voice was a wet, ragged whisper, barely audible. Spectre? The room went utterly silent. Even the gunmen stopped moving. Thorne stared, his mouth agape. What did he call you? Doc Spectre. Is that you? Miller rasped, a bloody froth on his lips. Kandahar, the fire base. Kaelin lowered his rifle a fraction of an inch. His head tilted. The name clearly meant something to him. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. Not at the plain nurse, but at the woman beneath. He saw the stillness in her posture, the absolute lack of fear in her eyes. He saw a professional recognizing another. Spectre, Kaelin repeated, the name a cold, hard thing in the air. The ghost of the green zone. I thought you were a myth. Anna paid him no mind. The past was roaring back, but it would have to wait. Miller was crashing. The monitor, hastily connected by another nurse, screamed its high, piercing alarm. Ventricular fibrillation. Cardiac arrest. "He's dead!" the resident shouted. "No, he's not," Anna snapped. Her entire demeanor had shifted. The quiet, invisible nurse was gone. In her place stood someone else. A commander. An authority forged in the crucible of combat triage. Her voice was a weapon. "Charge the paddles to 200. Now." A nurse, jolted by her tone, complied without thinking. Thorne was still on his knees, stunned. "We can't shock him. He has no rhythm." "I didn't ask for your input, Thorne," she said, not even looking at him. "Paddles." They were slapped into her hands. "Clear!" She slammed them onto Miller's chest. His body arched. The monitor flatlined. "No response." Again. 300. She shocked him again. Nothing. "He's gone," Thorne whispered, defeated. Anna threw the paddles to the floor. "The electricity can't get to the heart. The blood in the pericardium is insulating it. I'm opening his chest." Not a question. A statement. Thorne's head snapped up. "What?" "You can't. We're not in an OR. There's no sterile field. An emergency thoracotomy on the floor? That's butchery." She finally turned her gaze on him. It was glacial. All the warmth had been burned out of her years ago. "I've done this in the back of a shaking helicopter with nothing but a tactical knife and a headlamp. Compared to that, this is a luxury suite. You have two choices, Doctor. You can help me, or you can get out of my way. But if you stand there and quote protocol at me while my patient dies, I will break your arm." The sheer, unadulterated certainty in her voice silenced him. It silenced the entire room. Even Kaelin and his men watched, captivated. "Now," she barked, her voice echoing in the ER. "I need a number 10 scalpel, a giggly saw if you have one. If not, trauma shears will do. I need 2 large Kelly clamps, rib spreaders, and the largest suction catheter you can find. Go." The spell was broken. The ER staff, trained to respond to commands, moved. They didn't know who she was, but they recognized leadership when they heard it. They scrambled for supplies, their movements suddenly imbued with purpose. A scalpel was placed in her hand. She didn't hesitate. With a single, deep, and brutally efficient stroke, she sliced through the skin and muscle of Miller's chest, from his sternum, around to his back, along the 4th intercostal space. Blood welled up. A nurse gasped. "Suction!" Anna commanded, not looking up. The catheter was in her other hand, clearing the field. "Shears!" The heavy-duty scissors were passed to her. She worked with a speed that was terrifying and beautiful all at once. Snip, 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 cutting through the intercostal muscles. She shoved her hand into the opening, feeling for the ribs. Rib spreaders. Thorne, his face ashen, handed them to her. He watched, mesmerized, as she inserted the tool and cranked it open. There was a sickening series of cracks as Miller's ribs were forced apart, exposing the thoracic cavity. The lung, pale and collapsed, was visible. But beneath it was the real problem. The heart, encased in the pericardial sac, was a tense, purple, bulging mass, twitching feebly. It wasn't beating. It was being strangled. "There," she said, pointing with the tip of the shears. "Cardiac tamponade. Massive. The bullet must have nicked the ventricle." With delicate precision, She used the shears to snip a small hole in the pericardium. A geyser of dark, pent-up blood erupted from the opening, splashing onto her face and scrubs. She didn't flinch. She widened the incision, and the heart, suddenly free from the crushing pressure, seemed to sigh in relief. It was still, not beating. "Come on," she whispered, reaching into the chest cavity with her bare hand. She cradled the heart, her fingers finding the familiar shape. It felt like a dying bird in her palm. She began to squeeze, a rhythmic, steady compression. Open chest cardiac massage. 1, 2, 3, 4. She was pumping the life back into him with her own hands. "His pressure's coming up," a nurse called out from the monitor. "Got a rhythm. Sinus bradycardia, but it's there." A collective gasp went through the room. It was a miracle, a resurrection on a blood-soaked floor. Anna kept pumping, her arm pistoning with tireless precision. "I've got a bleeder on the right ventricle. Small, looks like a fragment tear. I need a 3-0 proline suture on a cardiovascular needle and a pledget. Thorne, can you handle that? Or are you going to stand there looking impressed?" The insult shocked him back to life. Dr. Marcus Thorne, the god of this hospital, was being ordered around by a float nurse. And he complied. He took the needle driver, his own hand surprisingly steady now, and placed a single, perfect stitch into the beating heart muscle as she held it still for him. The bleeding stopped. Anna continued the massage for another 30 seconds, then slowly, carefully withdrew her hand. The heart kept beating, on its own. A steady, solid rhythm appearing on the monitor. The room was filled with the sound of that steady beep, the most beautiful sound in the world. Anna Smith, or whoever she was, finally looked up. Her face was smeared with blood, her eyes burning with an intensity that made everyone flinch. She looked at Thorne. "Get him to an OR. He'll need a full bypass and washout. But I've bought you time. He'll live." Thorne could only stare. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The arrogance had been sandblasted away, leaving only raw, unadulterated awe. He finally found his voice, and it was thick with humility. I've never seen anything like that. In 20 years of surgery, I've never... Who are you?" Before she could answer, Kalen stepped forward. He had watched the entire procedure without a word, his rifle held at a low ready. "She's Dr. Anya Sharma," he said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. "Call sign Spectre. Lead trauma surgeon for Task Force 11, architect of the Lazarus Protocol, and the only survivor of Operation Nightfall." The name hit her like a physical blow. Operation Nightfall. The mission that had broken her. The black site in Syria. The betrayal. The reason she was Anna Smith, float nurse, and not Anya Sharma, surgeon. "How do you know that name?" she demanded, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Kalen reached up and pulled off his balaclava. His face was scarred, his eyes haunted. They were the eyes of a man who had seen the same hell she had. "Because I was there too, doctor," he said. "My team was providing perimeter security. We were the ones they left behind to die with you." The ER, a stage for a medical drama moments before, had just become something far more complex and deadly. The hostage situation wasn't random. It wasn't about money. It was about ghosts, and they had all come back to haunt Metropolitan General. "You're not here for a robbery," Anya stated, her mind racing, piecing it all together. The professionalism, the targeted takedown, the specific knowledge. "No," Kalen confirmed. He gestured to his men, who began herding the essential medical staff, Anya, Thorne, and 2 nurses, towards the elevators, leaving the rest of the hostages under guard. Miller, now stabilized on a gurney, was coming with them. "We're here for justice, and you, Dr. Sharma, are going to help us get it." They were moved to the 5th floor. The cardiac wing. It was quiet. The patients and staff already secured in rooms. Kalen's men were efficient, setting up a command post in the nurses' station. He led Anya and Thorne into a private consultation room. The official report on Operation Nightfall said it was a catastrophic intelligence failure, Kalen began, his voice low and intense. A mission to extract a high-value target that went bad. They said your surgical team was killed in the initial firefight, and you were the sole survivor, rescued by a quick reaction force. Anya said nothing. Her face was a mask of stone. That was the story she had been ordered to tell. The story that earned her a quiet, forced medical discharge and a new identity. It was a lie, Kalen continued. There was no intelligence failure. It was a setup, a kill mission. We weren't there to extract anyone. We were there to assassinate a political rival of a supposed ally, and our command intended to bury the entire operation, including all personnel, when it was done. Your team wasn't killed by enemy fire, Doctor. They were executed by our own. Anya felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. The ghosts of her friends, her team, rose up in her memory. She had blamed herself for 3 years, for being too slow, for not being able to save them. The weight of that failure had been the anchor that dragged her down into the anonymous life of Anna Smith, the man who gave that order, Kalen said, his eyes boring into hers. The man who left us all to die is here, in this hospital, on this floor. Thorne, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally spoke. That's impossible. We have no one here of that importance. The patient in the VIP suite is a Mr. John Wallace, here for a cardiac ablation. A cover name, Kalen scoffed. His real name is General Robert Maddox, the same man who signed your discharge papers, Doctor. The same man who built your cage. Maddox. The name was like acid in her throat. The man who had decorated her for bravery in a private ceremony, his eyes full of false pity. The man who had told her the lie she was forced to live. He was here, feet away. What do you want from me? Anya asked, her voice dangerously calm. Maddox has proof, Kalen explained. A data chip, encrypted files detailing the entire operation, including the kill order, insurance, in case his political enemies ever came after him. We have intelligence that he keeps it on him at all times, likely in a subdermal implant. His cardiac procedure was a cover to have it checked or replaced by a private physician. We are here to retrieve that chip. But our window is closing. When this lockdown hit the news, his security detail, Black Ops guys, will be on their way. We have maybe an hour. You want me to operate on him, Anya realized, to cut that chip out of him. He betrayed his own. He is a traitor who left American soldiers to die. He doesn't deserve the sterile comfort of a real operating room, Kalen said, his voice raw with hatred. You'll do it here, now, and you'll give me the chip. That is my price for the lives of your staff. Here it was, the ultimate moral crossroads, her Hippocratic oath, the sacred vow to do no harm, to treat any patient regardless of who they were, was in direct conflict with the woman whose life had been stolen. To save the hostages, she had to perform a non-consensual surgery on the man who had destroyed her. To get justice for her fallen team, she had to become a tool for another man's revenge. What would you have done in Dr. Sharma's position? Help the man who holds the hospital hostage, or protect the patient who ruined your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. She looked at Thorne, whose face was a mixture of fear and a dawning, terrible respect for the situation she was in. She thought of Miller, the Marine she had just pulled back from the brink of death. She thought of her team, their faces clear in her mind's eye. I am a doctor. The thought was a lifeline in a sea of rage. My duty is to my patient. But who was her patient? The innocent people in this hospital, or the monster in the VIP suite? Take me to him, she said. The VIP suite was less a hospital room and more a luxury hotel. A man in his late 60s, with cold, commanding eyes, sat up in the bed. He was hooked to monitors, but he looked anything but frail. General Robert Maddox. He showed no surprise at the sight of Kalen's rifle. His eyes landed on Anya, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Dr. Sharma," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "I see you've found some unsavory company." "She knows, General," Kalen snarled. "She knows what you did." Maddox's gaze hardened. He looked back at Anya. "Whatever this terrorist has told you, it's a lie. He's a disgruntled soldier with a vendetta. I did what I had to do to protect this country. Sacrifices were made. You were a soldier once. You understand that." "My team wasn't a sacrifice," Anya said, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. "They were an execution. You sent them into a trap, and then you had them murdered." "A necessary casualty of a complex war," Maddox dismissed her coolly. "You were saved because your skills were deemed too valuable to waste. I gave you a new life." "You put me in a prison and called it a new life," she shot back. The standoff was thick with years of lies and grief. Thorne stood by the door, a silent witness, guarded by one of Kalen's men. "The chip, Maddox," Kalen demanded. "Give it to me, and we walk away." Maddox actually laughed, a short, barking sound. "You think I'd just hand you the keys to my destruction? You'll have to kill me to get it." "That can be arranged," Kalen said, raising his rifle. "No." Anya stepped between them, her body shielding the general. The action was instinctual, the reflex of a doctor protecting a patient. She hated herself for it. "Stay out of this, Doctor," Kalen warned. "You need me to get that chip without destroying it, remember?" she reminded him, her mind working furiously. "If you shoot him, the bullet could shatter it. And even if it doesn't, you'll never get past the encryption without his biometrics. You need him alive." She was improvising, weaving a web of medical jargon and technical half-truths. She had no idea if the chip was that fragile, but they didn't know that. She turned to Maddox. "And you? You need me because you're not as healthy as you look. Your EKG is showing premature ventricular contractions. You're on the verge of an arrhythmia. The stress of this situation could send you into VTAC. You need a doctor, General. And right now, I'm the only one you've got." She was playing both sides, a dangerous, desperate gamble. Maddox's eyes narrowed. He was a master manipulator, and he recognized the game. "What's your proposal, Sharma?" "I'm going to treat my patient," she announced, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. "I will stabilize you. In return, you will tell me where the implant is. I will remove it under sterile procedure and hand it to Mr. Kalen. He will then take it and leave this hospital and everyone in it unharmed. That is the only deal on the table." It was a breathtakingly audacious move. She was negotiating the terms of surrender for both men. Kalen hesitated. He wanted blood, but he wanted the proof more. He nodded slowly. Maddox looked at her, a flicker of something. Was it respect? In his cold eyes. "The implant is in my left forearm, subfascial," he smirked. "You'll need more than a local anesthetic to get it out." "I'll manage," Anya said, turning to Thorne. "Get me a surgical tray, lidocaine, a number 15 blade, forceps, and a portable cautery." As Thorne and a nurse rushed to comply, Anya began her work. She wasn't just treating Maddox. She was asserting her own power. She was no longer a victim of these men. She was in control. She checked his vitals, administered a drug to control his heart rhythm, and prepped his arm with an almost defiant calm. The room became an impromptu operating theater, the fate of the hospital, the truth of a government conspiracy, and her own redemption all rested on the steadiness of her hands. She made the incision with practiced precision, cutting through skin and fascia. She saw the small, dark rectangle of the chip nestled against the muscle tissue. There it is, Kaylin breathed, stepping closer. This was the moment of truth. She could extract the chip and hand over the proof, or she could do something else. Her oath was to do no harm. But what about preventing future harm? Maddox was a cancer. If he walked away from this, he would continue to poison everything he touched. Her mind flashed back to the firebase, to a technique she had learned for dealing with embedded electronics near sensitive nerves, a modified cautery using a precise, high-frequency current to disable a device without removing it. She palmed the portable cautery tool. With a movement too fast for anyone to follow, she switched its setting from coagulation to a focused pulse. As she reached in with the forceps to remove the chip, she touched the cautery tip to it for a fraction of a second. There was no spark, no sound, but she knew the delicate circuitry inside would be fried. Useless. She lifted the chip out with the forceps. It looked untouched. She held it up for Kaylin to see before dropping it into a sterile specimen cup. "Here's your proof," she said, her face unreadable. She handed the cup to him. Maddox watched her, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. He had seen what she did. He understood the game she had just played. She hadn't saved him out of loyalty. She had neutralized him, leaving him with a useless piece of plastic under his skin and no way to prove her sabotage. She had checkmated both of them. Kaylin took the cup, his eyes burning with triumph. "Our business is concluded." He backed out of the room, his men following, their retreat as disciplined as their arrival. Just as they left, the distant sound of sirens grew louder. The police were here. The siege was over. In the room, only Anya, Thorne, and Maddox remained. "That was a clever move, Doctor," Maddox said, his voice soft. "You destroyed the evidence, but you also destroyed his reason for talking. You've protected the status quo." "You're wrong," Anya said, stitching his arm closed with neat, efficient sutures. "I didn't protect you. I gave him a useless chip, but I gave his testimony credibility. When the authorities find him, he's not just a hostage taker. He's a whistleblower with a story that will now be investigated because of the scale of this attack. And my testimony will corroborate his. You're not protected, General. You're exposed." She snipped the final suture. "I did no harm to my patient, but I also didn't let a monster walk free. My duty is done." Maddox stared at her, the smirk gone, replaced by a cold fury. He was beaten, and he knew it. In the chaotic aftermath, as SWAT teams cleared the hospital and the news crews swarmed, Anya Sharma found herself in Thorne's office. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, his hand still shaking slightly. He pushed a glass towards her. "I have spent the last 2 years treating you like a piece of furniture. I've seen residents with more presence. I was a fool." "You weren't supposed to see me," Anya said, taking a small sip. The alcohol burned a clean line down her throat. "That was the point." "Not anymore," Thorne said, his voice filled with a new, urgent purpose. "What you did down there, that thoracotomy, the way you took command, that's a skill set that doesn't belong on a clipboard. It belongs in charge." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "The board has been talking about creating a new rapid response trauma program, a specialized unit for mass casualty events, active shooters, situations like today. We need someone to build it from the ground up. Someone who can teach surgeons how to think like a medic, and medics how to cut like a surgeon. Someone who has been to hell and knows the way back." He paused. "We need you, Dr. Sharma. Not Anna Smith, the float nurse. We need Spectre." Anya looked out the window at the flashing lights painting the city in strokes of red and blue. For 3 years, she had run from her name, from her past, from the ghosts that haunted her. She had tried to bury her skills, believing they were part of a life that had only brought pain and loss. But today, those skills had saved lives. That past had given her the strength to face down monsters. She wasn't a ghost. She was a surgeon. She turned back to Thorn, and for the first time in years, she let herself smile. It was a small, tired, but very real smile. "You'll need to change my name on the hospital directory," she said. I stood in the ER later that night, long after the last of the police had left. The blood was gone, cleaned by the night crew, but I could still see it all. The chaos, the fear. The moment everything changed. Thorn, Miller, who was stable in the ICU, and I were the only 3 people in this hospital who knew the whole truth. To everyone else, I was just the quiet nurse who snapped under pressure and got lucky. That narrative would change in the coming days. The legend of Spectre would be replaced by the reality of Dr. Anya Sharma. I was no longer hiding. I was no longer a ghost haunting the hallways. The war had followed me home, but instead of destroying me, it had reminded me of who I was. My past and present had collided, and from the wreckage, a new future was being built. My future. On my terms. My name is Dr. Anya Sharma, and my work is just beginning.